The Vikings have a tough offseason coming up, filled with really difficult decisions, but they aren't all difficult. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcasting network. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The wild card round is here, and FanDuel is officially in playoff mode. So visit FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL, and grab your profit boost pack every NFL playoff game day. Today on the show, I wanted to go over some of the easiest no-brainers in the offseason. We have a lot of tough decisions in front of us, very difficult things to parse out, what to do at quarterback, difficult staff decisions, who to keep, who to cut, who to replace somebody with if they do end up departing for one reason or another, what to do about this contract or that contract. Should they trade for somebody? Should they trade somebody away? The draft is always difficult. There's a lot of really difficult decisions. It's going to be a spicy one for the Vikings to navigate. And that's probably going to be true a lot. That's just the nature of the NFL, right? If it were easy, everybody could do it. But there are some things that are very easy, that are some no-brainers, and I think that they're worth mentioning, that the Vikings should do these things, and I don't think I'm going to get a lot of pushback, and they're going to be pretty easy to pull off for one way or another. One of the harder situations that and the centerpiece of probably the next month of Locked On Vikings is going to be Brian Flores watch. So I will make a commitment here to try to keep you updated on everything going on in the head coaching searches that pertains to Brian Flores and his likelihood of leaving. Where I'm at, I'm not a journalist, I'm not a reporter. I know that there's been some reports from like John Krasinski and Alec Lewis about like some kind of consternation between Brian Flores and somebody else, and Mike Florio has reported that like the Raiders are interested because Tom Brady wants to do the Patriot way or whatever. There's all of that. I can't speak to any of it. You can talk to people who are in the building who have the sources who do that thing. That's not my game. But what I can do is at least just set the stage for you and help give you the context you need to kind of understand what this means or what that means intuitively. For example, big news in the NFL was that John Harbaugh was fired from the Ravens. It shakes a lot of this stuff up, and it's going to delay the entire timeline. Really, what this means for you that I'm very sure about is that it's going to take longer before you know the answer about Brian Flores. And it's going to take long before the Vikings know the answer about Brian Flores because it's going to take everybody else longer. And what's nice is because it's going to take everybody else longer to do things, it doesn't mean that the Vikings are going to miss out on opportunities or assistance or whatever, because everybody else is waiting too. The way this is going to go is there are teams that are waiting to see where John Harbaugh lands. And I would honestly guess that he is going to be the first head coach signing to a new team. I think he's going to be the first one because everybody is going to put everything else on hold if they're interested in John Harbaugh. It sounds as though just about everybody with an opening wants John Harbaugh, and he's probably at the top of a lot of, if not all of those lists. And there are teams that don't even have a head coach opening that want John Harbaugh. I think it was Ian Rappaport and Pelissero and Diana Rossini all reported that they heard from teams that have a head coach in place that are waiting to see where John Harbaugh goes, and maybe they're going to drop their guy and bring in John Harbaugh. Very spicy stuff. I don't think the Vikings are on that list, but I don't know. They do tend to surprise me. Rather, for the Vikings, it means that there's like a chain ripple effect. So let's say the Raiders are the team that we're afraid of for taking Brian Flores. By the way, if you want to look at all the interview trackers, it does not appear that the Titans are going to interview Brian Flores, at least not right now. Guys are still being added to that list, so we're definitely not out of the woods, but they have already kind of taken their like hot coordinators, Lou Anarumo, Steve Spagnuolo, Vance Joseph, and said, we're going to interview these guys. Like Vance Joseph has gotten a ton of interview requests. There are a lot of teams that are starting to build out those lists. We have yet to see a team request an interview with Brian Flores. The Dolphins and Titans have already put a lot of names on the list, and Brian Flores is not among them. The Dolphins, I would not expect to put Brian Flores on that list, nor would I expect him to go with the Giants. But basically, like there's two guys that I think are going to be highly sought after, which are John Harbaugh and Kevin Stefanski. Once those openings fill in, then the other teams will start figuring out what guys they want to add to their list. And maybe Brian Flores gets added to a list from a team that thought they had a chance at Kevin Stefanski, but misses out on Stefanski. So then Flores is kind of a secondary option. He gets brought in. Then from there, those teams are going to start looking around for defensive coordinators, and they're going to start firing all their staffs, clearing out staffs that are in place. And then once that staff is cleared out, maybe there's an offensive coordinator there's an O-line coach in Atlanta that doesn't know if he's going to keep his job or not. New guy comes in, fires the whole staff, brings in his own guys. Now that O-line coach is available, so he's going to get a job with somewhere. He might end up being an OC somewhere. And like that whole chain reaction happens, and all of it is completely stuck in carbonite until John Harbaugh goes somewhere, and I think until Kevin Stefanski goes somewhere. I think those things play out before anybody talks to the hot coordinators, which is the category that Brian Flores falls into. The other thing that I've been trying really hard to look into is the compensatory pick question. I got this question yesterday on Town Hall Tuesday. I didn't have a very good answer to it, but basically the Vikings are supposed to get 2 third-round picks if Brian Flores takes a head coaching job. But with his contract expiring, it's unclear whether or not he still counts as like a guy getting poached from the Vikings, right? Like he played out his contract. Why would the Vikings get compensated for a guy playing out his contract and going on to his next destination? And I don't know. The provision is for like developing, quote unquote, a minority coach or GM. And so I don't think it should matter to that, whether or not you like happen to leave on the last year of your deal or whatever. But I also can't find what other people's contracts were when they got it. Like I'm trying to look right now through other coordinators that became head coaches that got their team's compensatory picks, but like coordinator contracts are not typically publicly reported. Like it is very difficult to find those details. So I'm doing my best Google foo, but it is a little slow going. So if anybody remembers a time where somebody had an expiring contract, got a head coaching job, and then their former team got a compensatory pick about it, that would be a great thing, or didn't get a compensatory pick about it, but it's not something we typically always know. But the Vikings beat has been on this with like this sort of contract desync between Kevin O'Connell and Kwesi and the assistants. The reason I start with Flores is because the no-brainer here is to re-sign him to a deal to avoid all of that nonsense. The other advantage is that it makes for awkward interviewing a little bit more, right? Like part of the draw of Flores right now is you can sign him to whatever deal with whatever structure with whatever provisions you want. You can negotiate with him whatever you want. If Flores signs a contract with the Vikings and then goes and takes a bigger contract to be a head coach, 3 weeks later, which is possible, then that team negotiates its contract with Brian Flores, sort of stuck with whatever the Vikings agreed to already, with like payment contracts and payment plans and stuff like that. And Flores will probably be reticent to give any of that stuff up. Personally, I don't think that's that big of an issue. I don't think that puts anything on there, but it's a consideration, right? Where it makes it that much harder for him to find a head coaching job. And that's a fairly bad faith thing to do to him, even though it may advantage you objectively. And something that you would maybe want to hold off on this for, but I don't need it to be a real contract. Just keep him in the building, keep him under your employ so that if they're like me and they don't know if the compensatory pick thing happens, although Darren Wolfson has reported that they do expect the comp picks if Flores leaves. So maybe this is all a moot point, but sign him to a 1 year, $1 deal, like something that just keeps him there. That keeps him technically under contract, so it counts for all of this stuff, and that would solve that problem. But I would just love for him to have a contract to fall back on so that you don't have to deal with this possibility of him leaving to be a defensive coordinator somewhere else, which is very much possible right now. He would be perfectly within his rights to do that, and it's something that the Vikings absolutely cannot afford. The defense carried the offense this season. You have to remember that all offseason. The Vikings went 9-8 because the defense carried a bad offense. If the defensive coordinator and the mastermind behind that leaves, suddenly the only saving grace of the team is out, And it becomes a very, very messy project to bring the team back to the place that they could get to, that stepping stone you feel like they may have gotten to this year, where, hey, add 2 more wins, cover a kickoff better and they're in the playoffs. None of that is even a pipe dream without Brian Flores. And it's really hard for me to see it being any different next year. So get Brian Flores under contract. Get him under contract to a 1-year deal to be the defensive coordinator. You can do 1-year deals all day long, right? 1-year deal, 1-year deal, 1-year deal, and eventually he'll leave to become a head coach, and that'll be that. But get something, get pen to paper on something so that you aren't worried about the weird corner cases and technicalities where you could get Elvis Dumerville on a bad fax connection and then suddenly have something happen to your team. Like, don't risk that crap. If he goes and takes a head coaching role, there's nothing you can do about that. Go and God bless. But get something on the books so that the weird stuff can't happen. There's player transactions that I think are very, very, very easy as well. And I'm sure that you are going to feel at least similarly to me. That'll all be next on Locked On Vikings. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by Ultimate Quarterback. If you've ever dreamed of throwing that pass, being under center, under the bright lights, even if it's just a daydream, if you're someone like me that's got no hope of athletics at all, but come on, like we've all kind of thought about it a little, how fun would that be, right? Well, now you can. There's a mobile game called Ultimate QB Football Legend. And in this game, you step into the cleats of a number 1 draft pick quarterback, and it's your job to lead your team to greatness, turn a failing franchise into a dynasty. It's like a QB career mode game right on your phone. You sign contracts, train and upgrade yourself, build chemistry, and you even play the games. In 2D, you can rise through the ranks and become a pro football legend. You'll deal with the ups and downs of a QB career, from rookie nerves to playoff drama, and every choice shapes your journey. It's totally free to play, there's no ads, and it works 100% offline. So it's perfect for if you have to kill 5 minutes or if you're on a plane in airplane mode and you have to kill hours. Ultimate QB is there for you. Just head over to ultimate-qb.com. That's ultimate-qb.com, or search for Ultimate QB in the App Store. And something special just for you, use the promo code LOCKEDON, all caps, in the game store to get a free boost at the start of your career. Ultimate QB Football Legend. QB1, it's your legacy. This episode is also brought to you by Zocdoc. You all know me. I am a very, very big proponent of preventative healthcare. Go to the doctor when something feels a little wrong before it starts to feel a lot of wrong. And I have my own personal story where I had a mole. I didn't get it checked out for months. Now I have a huge scar on my arm that I'm going to have forever. And also just like a constant fear of this all the time. And Zocdoc helps me make those appointments I should have been making the whole time. It's a free app and website that helps you find and book high quality in-network doctors, so you can choose someone you truly connect with. It's super annoying otherwise to have to find the right person who's within 400 miles of you and they're open when you need them to be open and they're in your network and all of that. But you can get all of that with Zocdoc and even sort by specialty or symptoms, so you can quickly find the right fit. And you can check the verified patient reviews to get a real sense of the doctor's vibe and communication style. Stop putting off your doctor's appointments. Go to ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNFL to find and instantly book a doctor you love today. That's ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNFL. ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNFL. Thanks to Zocdoc for sponsoring this episode. Thanks so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. If you want to go ad-free on Locked On Vikings, if you're an everydayer and you want to show your support, go to the Everydayer Club. You can find it at lockedonvikings.supercast.com, and you can join for $5 a month or $50 for a whole year. You can get every single Locked On Vikings episode ad-free, no interruptions, and access to a special Discord server. Once again, go to lockedonvikings.supercast.com. Let's move on here with the no-brainer decisions here on Locked On Vikings. And another one I don't think I'm going to get a lot of pushback on is to tender Jaylen Redmond. So Jaylen Redmond is currently a pending free agent, but not in a very serious way. He is an exclusive rights free agent. That's because he has only accrued 2 seasons in the NFL. He was in the NFL in 2023 as well, but he wasn't on a team for long. I don't think he was ever on the Panthers practice squad, right? So he wasn't on an active roster and it didn't count. When you have only been in the NFL for 2 years and you are a pending free agent, something that can only happen to players that get cut from their original contracts and then have to kind of fight and scrounge their way through spring leagues and stuff like Jaylen Redmond, you become an exclusive rights free agent. It means that you can be re-signed for 1 year, and I believe this year it is going to be a $1 million contract. Peanuts in the grand scheme of things. 1 year, $1 million. Jaylen Redmond has absolutely no way to negotiate against that. It is a predetermined tender that you can slap on somebody, just like the first round tender, fifth round tender, or whatever you would slap on a player, near the end of their rookie contracts or an undrafted free agent elsewise. That is just a button that you press and Jaylen Redmond is back in the building. If you wanted to, you could also start to negotiate contract extensions with Jaylen Redmond and agree to something. Now, there is no reason to add to the amount of money you're spending this year, and this is a bit of a cap crunch year, so you have to figure that out. But you can tack on years on the end, and you can basically predetermine what is going to happen right now while you're in the cap environment that you are in, and potentially get a good deal, or you can wait until next offseason, and I think that would be perfectly fine. Probably what Jaylen Redmond would want anyways. He probably wants to get out of this exclusive rights free agent thing because there's like very little negotiating leverage for Jaylen Redmond right now. He literally, you click, it's like getting franchise tag. There's no negotiating against it. You either sign that contract or you're out of the NFL, and that is not the environment that you really want to be barging into somebody's office and demanding a better deal in. So I would anticipate that contract negotiations with Jaylen Redmond, if you want to sign him to longer term deals, which I very much do, is probably a saga for a later date. So for now, slap that exclusive rights free agent tender on him, get him back in the building, and be very happy. There's not too much more to say about that. If you want to know more about Jaylen Redmond, you can find it on my Patreon page, patreon.com/LukeBrownNFL. By the way, I just put the final JJ McCarthy video up. So we've done it. We've done every JJ McCarthy game. Most of his dropbacks I've broken down on Patreon. Only some screens and some like RPO stuff that is like not that interesting or whatever is excluded. Otherwise, basically every reasonably analyzable rep is on there. And a couple of different videos about Jaylen Redmond over the last 2 years. That dude's a dog. He's awesome. He is fantastically quick off the ball, fantastically quick horizontally off the ball, which is great for a lot of the schematic stuff that Brian Flores does. And for as long as we are running a defense coordinated by Brian Flores, or in the image of the one coordinated by Brian Flores, if he leaves, if they want to keep the same scheme, Jaylen Redmond absolutely needs to be in this building. Another guy that I think absolutely needs to stay in this building is Eric Wilson. Did so much more than I thought he would do this year. I still think it was a little bit of a weird deployment of him to like throw him at a tackle and then he would get kind of beat up there, but they definitely stopped doing that after a couple of weeks of experimenting with it. They pulled off of it, and then Wilson really blew up. He did a lot as like an overhang player on the outside of the real edge rusher, which is a different thing than when they put him like at 5 tech and say, okay, good luck against Andrew Thomas. That's not what I'm asking for. But as an off-ball linebacker, as a blitzer, I think he led all linebackers in pressures. Like, he was an absolute dog, right? Not as extraordinary in coverage, which is an important thing for linebackers to do, but perhaps the Van Ginkel-ish role of, or even the sort of up around the line of scrimmage, kind of be part of the front seven, be part of the run, and then come off the field when the nickel has to come out. That kind of linebacker role is a robust one in the Flores defense. It is one that gets a lot of run. It gets a lot of work. It is not a backup or a depth role or a rotational guy. That's a real starting player. And I think that Eric Wilson has earned, at the very least, a chance to fend off a younger player who is going for that role. If the Vikings want to like draft a linebacker or something, which I think is very in the cards. But barring, a first round pick that needs to get the role, Eric Wilson has earned every right to that role and should get it until he's ready to hang up the cleats. I really think Eric Wilson should never go to another franchise. He should stay in Minnesota for as long as he wants to keep playing. Now, he's 32, so I don't know how long that is. And you have to start doing the calculus of, like, you don't want to sign him to a 5-year deal, right? You have to do the calculus of, okay, if I'm going to pay him a 3-year deal, what am I paying him in his age 35 season? What am I paying him, and how athletic do I still think that he is going to be at age 35? But those sort of long in the tooth linebackers tend to win in other ways. They tend to get there, they leave a step early. If they can't get there a step faster, they'll leave a step earlier and still get there, right? It's the Harrison Smith rule, but in a tighter place. And not to mention all of the special team stuff that Eric Wilson has done here in Minnesota in both stints, honestly. Very cool player. Very good fit with the Brian Flores defense. Absolutely love having him around. And it's not going to be that expensive. Linebackers don't go for a lot these days. Linebackers are the running backs of the defense. They have been so unbelievably devalued that it's almost become a market efficiency in and of itself. The most expensive, bougie luxury, I spent way too much on my linebacker, is still making like $17 million a year. And that's like Zach Bond. That's the fourth highest linebacker contract in NFL active NFL contract. Sorry. That is like what we're talking about here. So for somebody like Eric Wilson, who is, a little longer in the tooth, you're there for your veteran prowess, you're coming off a good year, but you haven't always had the best career. You've been a backup for a lot of it. Like that is probably sub 10 million. And you can probably do 1-year deals from here on out. You don't have to deal with structuring. It doesn't have to mortgage anything. It just feels like a really good fit. The Vikings are looking right now for ways to get good fits, good starters, good play for a lot of snaps without breaking the bank for it, right? That is going to be a crucial piece of the puzzle. There's a lot of money stuff they can do, and I will do it sooner rather than later, probably. I will show you just how flexible the Vikings are on the cap and how much money they can make. But you still have to make an entire roster, and a big part of this, if the Vikings want to make enough money so that they can solve the problems that they have, bring in the safety that they need, bring in the run stuffer that they need, bring in pay TJ Hawkinson or replace TJ Hawkinson or whatever you want to do. For all of that, they cannot be looking at linebacker as this total barren void with like Blake Cashman and nobody else, right? They have to have, like when you have the opportunity to get this good of play at this good a price, you simply must do it. There is absolutely no question about it. You've got to get Eric Wilson back in this building. There are a couple of other ones I might get a little bit of pushback on that are very much no-brainers to me. And the way that I've spoken on this show, you probably know what they're going to be, but they still deserve a little bit of discussion. That'll be next on Locked On Vikings. This episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by FanDuel. It is time. Oh my God, it's the best time of the year. It's the wild card round. And FanDuel is in playoff mode. Every game day during the NFL playoffs, FanDuel is giving customers even more ways to get in on the action. Every NFL playoff game day, FanDuel users get a profit boost pack waiting for them inside the app. So that means every single day that there are playoff games, you get a pack loaded with multiple profit boosts that you can apply to the bets you like the most. Open your profit boost pack first thing on game day and see what boosts you want to apply. Think about where you want to apply them and lean into those game day instincts, whether you're backing an underdog, the momentum, defense, going for the right quarterback, whatever you think you are doing. Put a little more juice on the bets you are already going to make. You make your picks and then apply your profit boosts to go after even bigger payouts while the playoffs get rolling. Visit FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL, and grab your profit boost pack every NFL playoff game day. Moving on here with the Locked On Vikings podcast, a couple of things that are I don't think they'll be that controversial, but I could see some room for people to disagree with me. And the first one is the Vikings should absolutely, no questions asked to me, find a trade partner for Javon Hargrave. I haven't loved what Javon Hargrave brought to the table this year. He was a fantastic pass rusher, but he was such a liability in the run that it caused the Vikings to actually sacrifice other pass rush elements sometimes and pass defense elements, specifically in that loss against the Eagles and in a 9-8 team that was a half game out of the playoffs at the end of the day. Every single loss feels monumental. But that Eagles game, if you recall, had the Vikings using a lot of their backup defensive tackles. It was not a lot of Javon Hargrave and more defensive tackles. They brought in more size in all places and essentially over-prioritized the run out of so much fear of Saquon Barkley that Jalen Hurts put up a perfect passer rating on him. That, to me, is certainly not worth what you'll be working with his cap hit next year, and considering that the Vikings are still looking to be like 40 some mil over the cap, it certainly does not bode well for Hargrave's $21 million cap hit, which is in the top 10 of the entire team. Here is the rub. It would be a very easy cap casualty for me. However, he has $4 million in guaranteed salary. So guaranteed base salary is one of those kinds that travels with the player if he is traded. Signing bonus, that's money you've already given Javon Hargrave, and you just kind of took it out on a credit card and you got to pay it back. But guaranteed salary, you've just told Hargrave you're going to have it in a legally binding way, but it doesn't matter who pays him that $4 million. You've just told Javon Hargrave he's getting those $4 million. So if you could find a team that is looking for a pass rushing defensive tackle, that doesn't care about the run defense issues, that is maybe willing to rework with him his $14 million in base salary, and he'll probably have to take a pay cut from the Vikings no matter what. And asking Javon Hargrave to take a pay cut is maybe another option here. But you cannot just roll with him on a $21.5 million cap hit. That is absolutely not the kind of thing you can do for a guy that you very often, based on merit, because I don't think he was injured in any of those games. Correct me if I'm wrong, unless there was an unreported injury, which then brings up separate issues. But the way I'm perceiving this, based on merit, you put him in for like 10 snaps in a game. You can't have 21 mil doing that. And that's what they're looking at right now. So if they can find a trade partner for Javon Hargrave, if they can find somebody that is interested in that package and has some plan for what they want to do with that money instead, you have to find it, and you're not asking for like anything in the draft. I will do this for a 7th round swap across 2027 and 2028. I will do this. I would maybe even Osweiler a little bit. I'll give you a 6th round pick just to get the money off my hands, and give me a 7th in return. Get the money off my hands, and I'll call it a good favor and enjoy Javon Hargrave. But I think it is an absolute no-brainer to find a way out of this contract. And I think trading, given the opportunity to, you have to say yes. If anyone comes a calling for this guy, you say whatever you want. Yeah, what's your offer? Got it. Done. Actually finding that guy is that trade partner is of course going to be difficult. But I don't think this is a situation like you're trying, like much worse players have been traded for 6-7 swaps. Like I'm thinking like Jesse Davis a few years ago, right? Guys that you were maybe going to cut in camp have been traded away that way. So I do think that somebody can be interested in a 32-year-old defensive tackle who generated a ton of pressure last year and comes in with a lesser cap hit, by the way. He would only walk in with a cap hit of $18 million for the team that for a team that trades for him, because there's a lot of prorated signing bonus that the Vikings are on the hook for as well. $6.5 million stays with the Vikings no matter what they do. So it's an easier deal for a trading team than it is for the Vikings to stomach. And to me, that is that's the way that these deals kind of tend to materialize. You are going to want him more than we want him, and therefore we can start to negotiate about that. You're going to be more willing to pay than we are going to be, motivated to hang on to him. I just feel like with the way that I'm looking at this offseason, if the defensive tackle room next year is Jonathan Allen, who I haven't talked about nearly enough, he's had a good year, and Jaylen Redmond, who we've talked about a ton. If those are your main two guys and you bring in some big fat, 330-pound run stuffer that you draft in the 4th round, like it doesn't even have to be that good of a player, just a guy that can, two gap, or a guy, not even, a guy that can gap and a half, hold his spot, and never has to rush the passer in his life, I'm fine with that, right? I mean, who is the Ducks guy? Jamari Caldwell, that was it. That's like the gold standard. He worked out so much better than what the Chargers paid for him. But you're looking at a guy that with that kind of pedigree going in that could potentially take on a starting role, like a Jaquelin Roy kind of acquisition, and hope it works out a little bit better. That's what I would love for this D-tackle room to be, and it's not going to miss Javon Hargrave, I don't think, if it's in there. And then the last thing I want to do is I think that you should extend Brian O'Neill to a very disgusting void year contract. there's a bunch of facets to this, right? One, you are not currently in a position, if you look at the Vikings depth chart and the tackles they have under contract, they are not in a position to go get younger and cheaper right now. You needed Walter Rouse to be a lot better. I think the idea when you draft a tackle in day 3 is they're probably a backup. Maybe there's a world where they blow up and they're actually pretty good. And then you can get rid of the old expensive guy and you can turn to the young guy. But this is the Theo Jackson lesson, right? Where the Vikings had the guy that would be expensive in Cam Bynum. They thought the guy they had on the roster could do that. And when you want to save money on the cap and you want to try to get younger and cheaper, right? And free up assets to spend them elsewhere, and the dream we always dream of, you have to do so without creating a new problem that's going to suck up all those assets you just made, right? This is my hesitation with trying to save money by cutting TJ Hawkinson, right? You're just creating a gigantic vacuum, and now you're going to have to use all those assets and then some to fill it. So you're not actually making progress. And I feel the same with Brian O'Neill. He's in the last year of his deal, and it's very cuttable. But what do you do at right tackle, man? Now you got to use a first-round pick on it. So you saved a little bit of money, but you just burned your first-round pick to solve the problem you just made. This is not making progress. Instead, keep Brian O'Neill in the building. He's a very good tackle. He's one of the better right tackles in the league. He's in the top half, I would say, at least, conservatively. And yes, he is expensive. This is the time of year where that bothers everybody way too much because he does the job. If Walter Rouse were ready to take over and you were happy about it, I would be great about this. But if not, I would be very worried that you're doing the Theo Jackson thing again, where you're saying, well, we've got a guy ready to take over. Oh, whoops, he sucks. He's benched before the end of the first year of this. So instead, let's try to handle that cap hit in a better way. Now, if we can all agree we don't want to get rid of Brian O'Neill, which is, again, it's not something I feel I'm going to get a ton of pushback on. Now we can talk about how to make the contract very, very, very filthy. Look, Brian O'Neill has been restructured quite a bit. And going into the last year of this deal, a lot of what we're doing here could only happen after the extra bonuses from those restructures had expired, which they have. So now O'Neill only has $3.7 million in prorated bonus and $18.9 million in base salary. So you could do the, hey, would you be willing to take a pay cut thing? I don't love it when that happens. I think that sort of eats at his loyalty to the team. I think it uses that sort of political capital too much as a resource if you do that too much, but rather put a couple more years on that deal. Maybe even one more year on that deal. Again, he's 31. How much longer do you think Brian O'Neill will be a good tackle? O-linemen can age pretty gracefully. So I don't think it's crazy to, extend him for 3-4 years and then expect him to still be playing well at 35. That can happen for sure. But you got to figure out what your projection is for that. And then tack 5 void years onto that and extend everything into those void years. Just go absolutely nuts. Here is the thing. And again, I'll talk about this a lot more later, but 2030 is the key year. In 2030, the NFLPA and the NFL will negotiate a new collective bargaining agreement. That collective bargaining agreement is going to recalibrate the way that they project NFL revenue. And a couple of other things are going to happen that very much will affect NFL revenue in a way that will substantially change the salary cap. So much so that if you have $100 million in dead cap going into 2030, that could be fine. Like, you might be fine with $100 million in dead cap. I am not being hyperbolic. I genuinely think that could happen because the cap will go up by so much that will suddenly not be that much money. If we have 10 million in dead cap now, it'll feel like 10 million felt in 2015 the way 100 million might feel to us now. And so go ahead and run up the credit card debt. Go ahead, go crazy. Do everything on void years. Get absolutely aggressive with it. Keep every cap hit down, rack up debt, and be in an absolutely horrific position in 2030 when a gigantic influx of cash is going to come in and completely rescue you from all of it. And that means that for the next 5 years of the NFL, the real limit is going to be the willingness of your ownership to spend. And the Wills spent the third most money on players last year in the NFL. and they have basically never put a cap on the pocketbook. There was a little bit of a report that they had finally hit their ceiling last year after they spent $350 million, well over that year's salary cap. You can absolutely do this thing with signing bonuses, manipulate the cap like crazy, let Brzezinski do every heinous thing he ever wants. Get that cap hit for Brian O'Neill down, keep a veteran tackle and a leader in the building, keep a captain in the building, and move on from there without having to turn to some young idiot that has no idea what he's doing and getting yourself in a TJ Clemmings situation at right tackle. I think it's a no-brainer. If you don't think any of that stuff is a no-brainer, let me know. All right. I would love to hear the counter argument to some of that stuff that I think is pretty easy because it's probably a really hot take and I love hearing your hot takes. I will talk to you all tomorrow. And as always,